Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. This is a really special event for many, many reasons. First and foremost, we're welcoming a new Torah, which is in and of itself a cause of celebration, a huge cause of celebration. Torah contains over 300,000 letters, written painstakingly by hand in Eretz Yisrael, in the Holy Land. And to welcome a new Torah to the community is worthy of a celebration. Our sages compare it to a wedding, where everyone should go out to celebrate. It's doubly worthy of celebration in that we're remembering a dear friend, Gary Toback, who was a dear personal friend to many, including Bela and I, from the very beginning when we opened the Chabad house just a couple blocks away. And in many ways, Gary was like a Torah scroll. You know, the school my children attend, the Seymour J. Abrams Cheder Lubavitch Hebrew Day School, there's the name of Seymour J. Abrams. It has a little story behind it that I thought was apropos for this afternoon. The director of the school, Rabbi Yitzchak Wolf, had been trying for a while to meet a certain individual who owned a bank on the north side of Chicago, a man by the name of Seymour J. Abrams. But Mr. Abrams had been pushing him off. Nah, I'm not interested. So he said, Mr. Abrams, what are you interested in? Well, this was like early 90s. He says, I'm interested in rescuing Torah scrolls from Russia. And a light went off in Rabbi Wolf's head. And the next day, he walked into the preschool and saw two twin boys who had recently arrived from Russia. Called their parents and said, can I borrow your children for an hour? When they understood why, they agreed, and he marched into Mr. Abrams' office and says, I have 2 Torah scrolls from Russia. And the rest is history. His name now the school bears his name. And I think of that because each and every one of us is a Torah scroll. Something deep, spiritual, godly, powerful. As Ben Bagbag said in the Mishnah, Hafachba v'hafachba dekoilaba. Turn it again. Everything is in it. It's multifaceted, just like every one of us. And I recall fondly when Gary and Phyllis would come to our class every week, how many times Gary said, if only I had studied this in Columbia, my life would have been different. How so many things that he learned from Torah impacted his daily life. I once said to him, Gary, how do you reconcile being a scientist and the Torah study? And he said that he finds that the Torah elevates his science. Not only is it not a contradiction, he finds meaning in his daily work as a scientist as it is inspired by his study of the Torah. So I really could not think of a more fitting legacy to Gary's memory than a Torah scroll. And I'm really excited that Allison just told me that this Parsha, which this week we have every other week we do a minyan at Chabad house, and we will read from it this week for the first time, which is also Gary's Bar Mitzvah Parsha. It's really special. So, this is a very happy event. I'm so delighted that everyone came. Let me just tell you what's going to happen, because I've never done one of these before, and I'm sure many of you haven't either. So there is a lot of food, and we're going to spend a little bit of time completing the letters of the Torah, interspersed with a couple of short words from people. We'll hear from Rabbi Moskowitz, the director of Chabad of Illinois. We will hear from Dr. Andy Aronson, who is an old friend of Gary and agreed to be on the honorary committee together with Mitch Reutemann, who's our Gabbai, and Marshall Lindheimer, who is an old friend of Gary, who was influential in bringing him to the University of Chicago, but unfortunately could not attend. He is sailing down some river in Europe, and that was planned many, many months ago. So Marshall couldn't be here. So Andrew will represent our honorary committee. And then, last but not least, we will also hear from Phyllis. So we will start with inviting some people to write the last letters of the Torah.
Mazel Tov to Rabbi Yossi and Bela Brackman and the entire community of Chabad, of Hyde Park and University of Chicago. This Torah celebration, coming on the heels of Simchas Torah, when we complete and start again to study the Torah, reminds us of the meaning of the word Torah. The word Torah literally is from the word hora'ah, which means a lesson or guide. That the Torah is a guidebook, a lesson in how to live our own lives. Rabbi Yossi and Bela Brackman are a living guide to so many here and beyond, sharing the wisdom of Torah to so many. And that was Gary's life as well, someone that lived a life with the lessons of Torah. It's our hope and prayer that this celebration continues that inspiration, that guide, that lesson to all our lives individually and collectively. Mazel tov.
I'd like to call on Dr. Andrew Aronson to share just a couple of words as an old friend of Gary and a member of the honorary committee.
Thank you, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi and Bela. This is a wonderful celebration. And to the Tobak family, thank you. Now, the Rabbi suggested we first be brief and then a couple of words, so I think I'm at risk here of exceeding both of those guidelines. It's an honor for me to speak today about a friend and colleague who was taken from us sadly last year. Thank you to the Tobak family, Phyllis, Allison, Jonathan, and David, and their families for their generous gift to Hyde Park Chabad and the Jewish community. And thank you all who celebrate with us today and contributors who help make this possible as well. I knew Gary for almost 40 years and had the pleasure of working with him at the university, as well as becoming friends. Gary would be overjoyed that if there were going to be any honors in his memory, the most wonderful would be this Torah, Gary's Torah, which we complete and dedicate today. Gary was a physician and scholar, father, husband, and friend to many. He enjoyed patient care, scientific research, and teaching, all of which he was successful at doing. He was one of the most focused people I have known and dove deeply into interests with his inimitable seriousness. When he started running, he seemed, and I didn't know he had actually started before I knew he had started, he seemed never to miss a day, not an easy feat in Chicago. When he studied Talmud and Torah, he worked with teachers and further filled his already full days at the university. When Gary was asked to lead the nephrology division for an unspecified period, he led with a quiet firmness, which was described to me by one of his colleagues as, quote, righting the ship, close quote. This was an unenviable task, which he accomplished well. Gary was devoted to his patients as he also worked simultaneously in his lab and was always pleased to teach students, residents, and other nephrologists using his version of the Socratic method, with asking and answering questions and always assuming that everyone was prepared and had done their homework. He taught by example, which he enjoyed more than didactic teaching. At conferences, I remember Gary asking a question of speakers with a special look he had when he wanted to coax explanations from the speaker or the others attending when something wasn't clear to him. Always precise, pointed, professional, and polite. Gary is missed by many people whose lives he touched, and it is an honor for us to celebrate his life with this holy event of dedicating Gary's Torah this day. Thank you very much for coming and celebrating with us. And now it's my honor to introduce Phyllis Tobak.
It's a joy to see the fulfillment of what, to me, was just a dream. I don't know how long ago it was that David and I had a conversation about how to honor Gary's memory, and I suggested that he would love having a Torah. Gary and I met Rabbi Aaron Wolf almost 20 years ago. Gary decided that he wanted to start studying. And Rabbi, he is actually a rabbi. No,
Weiss?
yeah, Rabbi Weiss, Rabbi Dr. Weiss said, well, there's going to be a new course starting in a few weeks. Why don't you check it out? And it was a course in Tanya. And Gary and I had no idea what Tanya was, but we were assured that it was an important book. So we started going to his class. It was on Sunday morning. And we went, until Gary died. It was one of the most important things he did. We had a weekend house in Indiana, and I used to say, well, let's sleep over and come back on Sunday a little late. He would never want to be late for the Sunday morning class. And that's what was important to him, that Torah class. Actually, we studied a number of different things with Rabbi Wolf, but it was very, very important to him. It was the highest priority to get to that Sunday class. So one of the things that this event inspired me with was this time we went with Rabbi Dr. Weiss. He's a doctor and a rabbi. He invited us to a Torah scroll dedication. And they got a picture of Gary standing there with a wonderful look on his face. And we put this up right away, and it's been, I don't know, it's 15 years or something. So I'll pass it around. So I brought, there was a scholar named Miller. What's his first name? Chaim Miller issued a new version of Torah with Rabbi Schneerson's commentary. And I don't know if you can see the binding of this book. Well, Gary studied this book all the time, and he really wore out the binding. But he never went anywhere without that. Or sometimes he'd borrow my copy, which was a little smaller one. The other thing he never stopped studying was this book of Torah studies, which was written by, it was adapted by Rabbi Jonathan Weiss. And Jonathan Sachs was a very favorite writer of Gary's. And this is a book he would read constantly. Gary never read something once. He read things again and again and again. And he read the Parsha every single week for years. I don't know if he put his, I have a habit of putting a date whenever I pick up a book for the second time. But this book was very, very important to him. And also Rabbi Sachs's volumes of Torah study, which came out. I don't know if they're all out yet, but whenever they came out, Gary was so excited by them that he sent all of the children copies so that they could get the same pleasure that he had from it. So this is one example of the multi-volume Sachs. And Gary wrote all over his books. And some of the portions he particularly marked. And this is a very typical comment that Gary was intrigued by. It's about Abraham being a new type of human. For Abraham, the command is life itself. God speaks, Abraham listens and acts, without resistance on the one hand and with pride on the other. His life is an answer to God's question. His existence is lived in the conscious presence of the divine will. Doesn't that sound like Gary? I mean, that's what his life was about. It was about living with that kind of awareness all the time. And when we started to decide what to put on the Torah scroll, I said, it has to be something in nature, because Gary loved nature. He ran outside whenever he could, and he ran all year round until he bought a treadmill. And once he got a treadmill and set it up in the basement, he would have a big stack of the Rebbe's video lectures, and he would just watch. Some of them he'd watch again and again and again, and it was just, it was just so important to him to be able to study and to be able to wake up and do his exercise and then get the running in, which was, a 2 for the price of 1, or else to go outside and run. Those were some of the most important things in his life. He loved to be in touch with nature. And actually, Allison was saying the other day that when she ran around at one of the paths that he used to follow out in Michigan City, she was looking at the sky and knowing that Gary was with her and he was enjoying the seashore. I want to just close with a card. I have dozens of cards that I've saved over the years because Gary was very deliberate about cards. And this one was written in February of 2012. The first time I met Gary, I was 13 and a half, and he was 15. And we met the first day of school in high school in Park Sloan, a school that was then called Manual Training High School. And that was it. We were together. I wasn't always quite as smitten as he was, but this is his Valentine's Day card from 2012. The first time you smiled, you had my undivided attention. Then you laughed and I was captivated. When we kissed, the world stood still. And when you said you loved me, you captured my heart forever. With all my heart and with all my love.
If you could just look to the podium for a minute. Every family, each of Gary's children and Phyllis are going to receive a Torah for their home that's similar to one that will be in our Chabad house that says Gary's Torah, October 15, 2017, 25 Tishrei 5778. We have one of them here and the rest on display at Chabad house. They have a piece of your grandpa in your home. This is how he's continuing his special life through all of you and through Torah learning.
There is one last letter to be written, and I feel it would be most appropriate to give Rabbi Aaron Wolf the honor of the last letter as someone that inspired Gary week in, week out. The last letter is a lamed. The first letter of the Torah is a bet. The last letter is a lamed. Combined, they are a lev, which means heart. The actual lamed in the last letter is from the word Yisrael. Yisrael is the last letter, the last word of the entire Torah.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov, mazel tov. Mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov.
כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר השם מירושלים 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 כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר השם מירושלים
Amazing how you get all these magnets.
Yeah, somebody hold the door? You bet. Thank you.
What would they give?
And then we will continue dancing on page 1. After we're going to recite the first round together. After on page 1. After Saladas.
It's also projects for the kids to
May your descendants be like the dust of the earth. They should spread north, south, east, and west. And all the families of the earth should bless you.
Thank you.
And the first hakafa. Everybody move in, please.
Remember that we're the seed of the Torah.
Blend into your room.
Dance a lot.
Go ahead, David. Keep going, brother. to lead us in the second Hakafa. Go ahead.
Yes.
And the third Hakafa. Just in case you didn't do enough on this. Doctor, you got a little dance? Okay, good. Okay, no problem. seventh hakafa, and because the differentiate between Simchat Torah and a non-Simchat Torah, we do an eighth, which will be blended in. Go ahead. No, it's just two specific words. Like a Kadosh Menorah, Shiana. Kadosh Menorah, Shiana. Rachum Bechanun, Hatzlichana. Rachum Bechanun, Hatzlichana. Shomer Habras Aneinu, B'yom Kareinu. Shomer Habras Aneinu,